Hello, I'm Akila, and today I'm going to be talking about Baldur's Gate 3, a game that many people in the gaming community call the best example of choice-based storytelling in modern gaming. Reviewers often say things like, you can do anything, every playthrough is unique, and your choices really matter. But today I want to ask a different question. Does Baldur's Gate 3 actually give players full control, or does it just feel like it does? So for my thesis statement, I wrote that although Baldur's Gate 3 gives players countless choices that seem to shape their personal journey, the idea of full control is misleading. Every player is still required to follow the same central storyline, face the same major events, and choose from only a small group of endings. The game provides the feeling of control, not complete control itself. So today I'm going to explain how Baldur's Gate 3 creates the illusion of complete control by looking at 1. The fixed narrative path, 2. The illusion of choice and major outcomes, and 3. How the game's mechanics and character systems limit what players can actually do. If you've never heard or played this game before, don't worry, I'll explain everything in simple terms. So now you're probably wondering, what the hell is Baldur's Gate 3? Let me explain. Baldur's Gate 3 is a fantasy role-playing video game released by Larian Studios in 2023, built on the rules and world of Dungeons & Dragons, which I know can be a little hit or miss for some people. But it's a tabletop game where players imagine characters, make choices, and roll dice to determine the outcomes of their actions. So in Baldur's Gate 3, this translates into a digital, choice-driven adventure where you design your own hero, decide their appearance and abilities, and guide their behavior through the story. As you explore the world, the game constantly presents you with decisions: what to say in conversations, who to trust, which factions to support, and how to resolve conflicts, whether it's through combat, diplomacy, deception, or creative problem solving. And each choice influences how the story unfolds, or at the very least makes you feel like you're shaping a unique, personal version of the narrative. Now that we know a little bit about the game, we can get into our first key point, the core narrative arc. And the key concept I'm applying to this is narrative, which refers to the main storyline, the sequence of events the developers create that every player must experience. So in Baldur's Gate 3, the narrative is fixed, even if it doesn't feel like it. The game forces every player into the same beginning, no matter who you create in the beginning, such as an elf or barbarian or a custom character. You always start the story the same way. So in the beginning, you're kidnapped by monsters called mind flayers, and a parasite is placed in your eye. And this tadpole threatens to transform you into a mind flayer, and this becomes an unavoidable goal for the rest of the game. So you have to figure out how to remove or control the parasite. You can't ignore it, you can't throw it away, you can't just choose to live a completely different life in the game. The story will not progress until you follow this narrative. Everyone must also visit the same major locations. Even though the world feels huge and open, the main storyline forces every player through the same major story checkpoints. In Act 1, the beginning of the game, the player has to go to the Emerald Grove. This is where druids and tieflings are struggling to survive against goblin attacks, and you have to choose how to resolve the issue in order to progress. In Act 2, you go to the Shadow Curse region and the Moonrise Towers, where you must confront the villain Ketheric Thorum. And in Act 3, the last act of the game, you make it to the city of Baldur's Gate, where you must face 3 major antagonists: Orin, Gortash, and the Netherbrain. So you can approach these areas in your own style through stealth, combat, diplomacy, and exploration, but the locations themselves don't change. And for my last example on this section, everyone has to visit the same villains. Even if you negotiate with them or you avoid the fight, it is important that you meet these people, and you can't avoid doing that. So you have to deal with, as I mentioned earlier, Orin the Red, Lord Gortash, the Netherbrain, and these confrontations are necessary in order for the story to continue. Moving on to our next key point, the illusion of choice and major outcomes. The key concept I'm applying here is agency, which is the feeling that your choices matter and the belief that your decision changes the story in a meaningful way. So BG3 does give players agency during their journey, but in the end, the major outcomes are actually very similar, and the final ending of the game only comes down to 4 options. So after 80 to 100 hours of gameplay, you have final choices that are variations of: 1, you can destroy the Netherbrain and sacrifice yourself in another character. 2, you can take control of the Netherbrain and become a powerful ruler. 3, you can be a little bitch and submit to the Netherbrain. Or 4, you can serve Ball, but that's only available through the Dark Urge storyline. These endings are different, but structurally they fall into just a few categories. You save the world, woohoo. You control the world, I don't know, depending who you are, that might be a woohoo for you. Or you can let evil win. And your hundreds of smaller choices don't create hundreds of ending combinations. They just funnel into these 4 final outcomes. And continuing off of the point that your smaller choices don't really change the role that much. During the game, you can save characters, you can romance your companions, you can break alliances, betray people, control who lives or dies, but these choices matter emotionally and change your personal story, but they don't really change the state of the actual world. And after everything is resolved with the Nether Brain, there's an ending scene at the docks of Baldur's Gate, and that just wraps up your story in like a short little summary. And during the scene, you might have extra dialogue options with your companions, or they might say different things during the scene, but the fate of the world or the city itself is mostly unchanged. And the journey will look different for every player, but the destination is mostly the same. And now for our final key point, the mechanics, system, and origin stories that limit choice. The key concept I'm applying here is procedural rhetoric, which means the game's rules themselves communicate ideas or limitations. So BG3 systems and rules, such as the dice rolls or the origin-specific storylines, restrict players' access to certain choices and outcomes, and I'm going to be going over 4 of them. First, we have our dice rolls. So in BG3, dice rolls decide whether your character succeeds or fails at certain actions, especially during conversations, persuasion attempts, or skill checks. When a situation requires a roll, the game shows a virtual 20-sided die. The number you need to hit is displayed on the screen, for example, like roll 15 or higher, and your character's abilities add bonuses to the roll. So if you have high charisma, you get bonuses to persuasion. If you're skilled in sleight of hand, you get bonuses when picking locks. When you roll the die, the game adds to your bonuses. And if the total meets or beats the target number, you succeed. If not, you fail, and the story can change based on that failure. Players can also reload a save and roll again if they don't like the result, which makes the system feel both fair and flexible. And the dice creates tension, but the player still has some control over the outcome. Next, you have class, stats, and race. So your character's build determines your choices you have access to. There are 12 classes and 11 races in BG3. So for example, a low charisma fighter can knock track the way out of conflicts. A high intelligence wizard may unlock special magical dialogue. A cleric may get unique interactions with gods. And a druid can transform into and speak to animals. Random side fact, you can have sex with a bear in this game. Yep. That bear I just showed, you can have sex with him. If I had learned that, so did you. Next, origin stories can lock or unlock major content. BG3 gives players 2 types of heroes. One, the custom character, which is a character you can create, or the origin characters, such as Astarion, Lae'zel, Gale, Shadowheart, Will, or the Dark Urge. And the Dark Urge in particular has like an entire storyline, which includes like murder impulses and like special endings. I mentioned like in my first point, you can serve ball, and no other character can access that. So not everyone even gets the same narrative opportunities. And for the final example, which I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the parasite storyline cannot be avoided. So even if you are role-playing a character who tries to ignore the tadpole in their brain, the game forces you to think about the tadpole through dreams, NPC interactions, and mandatory storylines that you're going to have to go through. The game mechanics always reinforce that core narrative. So conclusion, does BG3 truly give players full control? No, not exactly. If you said yes, you're not paying attention. The game delivers an incredible feeling of freedom. You can explore, experiment, build relationships, and solve problems in your own way, and that emotional agency is actually very powerful. But behind the scenes, in the deep layers of the game, the core narrative is still fixed, the major outcomes are limited, and the mechanic control what options are available. So BG3 gives players the illusion of freedom, and honestly, that's part of what makes it so effective. The game blends structure and choice very smoothly that the constraints rarely feel like limitations. That is all. Thank you so much for watching. Please, no questions.